Right, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to Active Travel Cafe. And tonight we are lucky to have Sarah Hughes from Cambridge Sustainable Travel Alliance, who's going to share some actions and outcomes from their recent election campaigning on active travel and public support. So we'll be turning to Sarah in just a moment. Just a quick reminder to put questions in the Q&A box. Thanks in advance to our speakers. Thank you so much. And as ever, we'd love to be able to kick off our session this evening with a bit of a roundup of news and what's happening in your area. So hands up, anybody who's got anything they'd like to share from where they are on active travel issues. I thought, Robin, you might jump in, and then I'll go to Age. Robin, what's been happening in Oxford?
So this very day, the Cabinet of Oxfordshire County Council approved for consultation a temporary congestion charge. So you may know that Oxfordshire has been planning traffic filters in Oxford for some years, goes back to 2015 in fact. They have been delayed by Network Rail's works on the Botley Bridge, were planned to take a year and a half, turned out to take 3 years. And the traffic congestion carries on. Bus companies have been complaining, rightfully so. The bus is terribly slow, and a lot of other traffic is slow. So they have come up with a clever wheeze of using the sites and the cameras for the traffic filters, and using them to charge a £5 congestion charge with essentially the same software. So it's the same exemptions, it's the same sites, it's the same timing, but the fee would be £5 per day instead of a fine of £35, £70 if you don't pay it within 2 weeks. So that's been approved for consultation today. We had, I think we had about 18 public speakers. We managed to make it more in favour than against. We had a good show from our campaigning crowd, and it really shows the Lib Dems in Oxfordshire are forging ahead using their mandate that they got and their majority from the recent county elections. So that consultation will be live in probably a week or two, run for 6 weeks, and then obviously there will be the decision after that. Maybe other ideas will emerge. Who knows? There's a lot of people saying this is terrible. Will they come up with better ideas? Who knows? We'll see. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, Robin. That's really exciting to hear. Robin, can we stay with you just for a minute? Because I know we're going to be this session is going to be quite a lot of political lobbying, isn't it, Sarah? We're going to get into that in a minute. So could you just very briefly tell us a little bit about the politics behind that vote? And you mentioned that Lib Dems had leaned hard into it, but I'm sure it'd be fascinating for us to hear how the political debate has panned out to today.
Yes. Well, it was. So this was the cabinet. So we now have a cabinet system in Oxfordshire County Council. Lib Dems have 36 of the 69 seats on Oxfordshire County Council. So they have a majority, which they got in May. The 4 years before that was no overall control, and they initially started with a three-way pact between the Lib Dems, Greens and Labour, halfway, which was constantly negotiating things between them, and then between the three parties they had a majority. Halfway through that, they fell out with Labour over SEND, special educational needs. It's complicated, and Labour left the alliance. That left Lib Dem Greens as the largest group, carrying on with a minority, which meant that every time they wanted to get something through, they had to essentially make some kind of deal with one of the other parties, which was most often Labour. So they usually had to take some of the Labour ideas into their policies. So it was a lot of wheeling dealing. The traffic filters actually go back to 2015, and what was then a Conservative-led county council, working with a Labour-led city council, deciding, yes, we have to do something about traffic congestion. and it was a very business-led Conservative council that decided they have to do something about it. So it's very much a case of the party in power realises they have to do something. When you're in opposition, you throw sticks at it, and that's what's happening again. Labour now are throwing sticks at it, but when they were in power, they were progressing it. Well, it's a bit messy to watch, but the Lib Dem majority is forging ahead and making a big point about doing that. So we're glad that something's happening.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good insights. Thank you so much. Right. You've mentioned you're having problems, but you've still got your hand up. So if you can speak to us, do you want to tell us what's happening where you are?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry I missed last week. I had a look at the tram tracks in Ghent, and I did a lot of work with Nottingham in 1999. We rewrote the 1870 Tramways Act and improved the standards of tram track. It looks like they need a lot of work on their tram track because of the profile across the rails. And Croydon, Sheffield and Edinburgh both have absolutely disastrous first phase tracks that still need to be rectified. Manchester, on the other hand, have really got it well sorted out now, and that seems to be running quite sweetly. Last week, I also went to the Mobility as a Service Scotland meeting, and I think I made a good marriage. I got the car share people talking to Lothian buses and some of the bike share people. And we've also got some interesting cargo tricycles back up here. The Rittle is working for Zero E and Delivery Mates. And it's a properly constructed tricycle cargo bike, which carries modular freight. So I'm going to try and get a little bit more detail on that. And they appear to be operating properly. In other words, they pay their riders a flat rate and then a per package, rather than the riders constantly racing around trying to earn money at something like 65 pence a drop, which means that a lot of these gig economy riders are actually sort of going like maniacs to deliver as many packages as possible. And quite happily, they're not dealing with every, which is quite good. I think that's me up to speed, basically.
Thanks, Ace. That's a really good update. Thanks very much. I do wonder whether we need to go deep into tram tracks. Actually, Robin, we need a tram tracks dedicated session, I think. Mark, can I come to you in Brussels, you lucky man?
Yeah, well, tram tracks in Brussels, as I said, it'd be interesting to compare those. I wanted to actually ask H, because there's been talk here about the Glasgow bike share contract, which is being relet. And there's been a lot of disquiet and a lot of people here saying it's not a very good procurement and it's going to end up with not a very good system. And I just wanted to, if you could shortly, Dave, if you could give a short response on that, because, as I said, lots of the industry here have been muttering about it.
Cool, thanks, Mark. Dave, H, did you want to come in on that?
Oh, there we go. I had actually wanted to get in touch with Kevin Argue, who's the person responsible for cycling in Glasgow. There's quite a few things to catch up on there. I have my doubts as well, and I'm quite concerned to hear that Uber and Lime are talking to Edinburgh rather strongly, which again, I'm very concerned about the way some of these schemes are managed. Generally in Scotland, we use Section 97 of the Road Scotland Act. And that means that if you operate a bike share scheme, you have to have a license to do it. And they set the terms and conditions and the key performance indicators. Quite interestingly, the Bivegan, the Spanish people, collapsed and they pulled out of, I think, 3 schemes in Scotland, 2 schemes in Scotland, Sestran, Forth Valley, but they left the bikes in Inverness, and Hightrans has taken it on, and they're working with a Portuguese operation which does the software and the hardware for it, and they're still using the EAPCs in Inverness with a Portuguese company. They're called WeGo Share, I think it's called.
Yeah, they're all here. They're all here today. All those companies. I was also asked to speak to Andy, but I'll do that offline.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot we can. Well, there's a lot we need to talk about there, Mark.
We'll talk. We can talk separately, Dave, at some
Yeah.
point soon.
Yeah.
The one thing to top up with on tram tracks, it was mentioned in the discussion. I got Velostrail approved for the use in the UK in 2014, but it's only for level crossing, because the level crossing, you don't have the problem with the groove. It's just a flangeway. And so Velostrail virtually wipes out all cyclist pools on level crossings because it fills the flangeway.
Thanks, H. Yeah, we definitely need that dedicated session without a shadow of a doubt. And we need to talk about your camera, H, because it's slightly scary with the big red smear all over it.
Yes.
Looks like a nasty sci-fi movie. Anybody else got any news from where they are that they want to share with everybody before I bring Sarah in? No? Last chance? Okay. Well, Sarah, I think we might be coming
Sorry,
straight to you.
there are a couple of national things that are worth highlighting, Steve.
Yes, Robin.
If I just run them through briefly. So the spending review, I think the chat that we've had about that is it wasn't that exciting. It looks more like a leveling off. There's a gain in certainty over 4 years, but no great increase in level. But there's a bit of uncertainty because the money seems to be just for infrastructure. We've been talking about illegal e-bikes. The all-party political group on cycling and walking produced a report on that is worth a read. And finally, the London Assembly voted on doing something about large cars, SUVs. I don't think it was specific on what, but that means that the mayor or TfL has to consider that and think about whether they do something or not. So we may see some action on that. So just lob those in.
Thanks, Robin. Really good. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And the large cars piece, I don't know whether anybody saw it, but Danny Williams, formerly of Active Travel England, was posting about it on LinkedIn. Well worth searching out, because he's currently directing rather a large national strategy on transport. Right, brilliant. Sarah, can we come to you for you to tell us about your amazing campaigning and lobbying work? And then I think we're also going to pull in Anna Williams from Camcycle as well. But if you kick us off, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. I will just start sharing some slides. Very much for the help. Right, how's that? That looks good to me.
Wonderful. Looks good.
Thank you very much for the help. So, yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today. And as Steve said, I'm going to talk about Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance's 2025 local election campaign. I'm going to focus in the slides on what we did, but it would be really great to get into the impact of our campaign and the learning during the discussion. Before I started, I wanted to say a note about the relationship between Camcycle and the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance, because the original publicity for the presentation described me as a Camcycle staff member. So Camcycle is a founder member of the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance, and indeed, I think many would say the driving force behind it. And so while they currently facilitate my employment on behalf of the wider alliance, or on behalf of the alliance, all the work I do is for the wider travel alliance, not Camcycle specifically. And as Steve's mentioned, Anna Williams from Camcycle, she's head of campaigns and engagement, is here on the Zoom and can answer any Camcycle specific questions in the discussion. So what is Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance? We were founded by 3 organisations: Cambridge Area Bus Users, Cambridge Living Streets and Camcycle. They're the 3 groups that campaign for better buses, walking, wheeling and cycling in the Cambridge area. And as Roxanne has already alluded to in the chat, we formed in October 2022 in response to proposals for road charging in Cambridgeshire. We formed to campaign positively in support of those proposals. Unfortunately, those proposals fell away. However, we realised along the way that it was highly effective to campaign as an alliance, so we've continued to do so. And most of our funding comes from the Foundation for Integrated Transport, so many thanks to them. You can see on the screen that we've currently got 31 member organisations. They're both local and national. They span campaigning groups and also businesses. And they're also not only transport-centred organisations, but also organisations whose main focus is environment and health. And in the context of local election campaigning, I should also say that the Alliance is non-partisan. So moving on to the background, elections are held every 4 years in our region for the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority and councillors for Cambridgeshire County Council. And those elections were held on the 1st of May this year. They are critical because they are elections for the leaders of our Transport Authority, the Mayor, and the leaders and the councillors for our Highways Authority, the County Council. Turning first to the mayoral election, at the beginning of 2025, we had a Labour mayor in position who had stood for election on a platform of improving bus services, specifically to bring in or to make the decision for bus franchising. However, due to a change in the electoral system, it was widely expected that the Conservative candidate, Paul Bristow, would win the mayoralty. And you can see some of his campaign literature on the left-hand side from the get-go, and he launched his campaign really early. So in November 2024, it was really clear he was going to run a pro-motoring campaign. I put 4 of his 6 priorities on the top right-hand side of the screen. So his campaign priorities were dualling main A roads, ending the war on motorists. Specifically, he's campaigned to remove a modal filter bus gate on a street in Cambridge called Mill Road. He was campaigning to stop increasing taxes, and there he is referring to the mayoral precept to fund buses, which was brought in and then increased by the former Labour mayor. And he also was campaigning on building light rail. There's a long history of light rail proposals in Cambridgeshire, but as everyone I think knows, we haven't got a light rail system yet. Then considering the county council elections at the beginning of 2025, the Lib Dems held most of the seats, but not a majority. They were the leaders in a rainbow coalition. And I think that situation was broadly expected to continue. The picture on the bottom right shows you how the Lib Dems launched their election campaign for both mayor and county council, and I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions from that picture. So why did we want to run a local election campaign? Well, quite simply, we wanted a really good outcome for sustainable transport. And we were worried that the outcome, particularly of the mayoral election, may not give the best result for sustainable transport. We wanted, firstly, to turn the conversation away from the culture wars and put the focus back on why sustainable transport improves people's lives and how it does that. For the mayor, our objective was to try to turn the conversation away from light rail and a bit more towards what the mayor could actually deliver. There's no funding in place for light rail for Cambridge. However, the picture on the right-hand side gives a big hint that it is possible to improve bus services in his term in the next 4 years. And indeed, the Labour mayor had been improving bus services. So that work really should continue. And then for the county council candidates, we wanted them to have a space in which they could say something positive about sustainable transport. In our region, after the falling away of the road charging proposals, we've found that city and county council candidates want to say as little about transport as possible. So we wanted to push them to make some positive statements. Then lastly, we wanted to go a small way to help the public understand why the elections were critical for transport. Conversations among our networks in the playground at school had revealed that people really hadn't drawn the link between the upcoming elections and transport at all. Many people had told me that they weren't going to bother to vote, so we really wanted to increase engagement. And we wanted to build some relationships with the candidates and increase our profile as we did so. I should say we were building on 18 whole years of election campaigning by Camcycle, so building on a really strong knowledge base there. Camcycle runs an election survey every year, and if you want to hear more about Camcycle's work in this area, go to Active Travel Cafe. There's a link on the bottom right-hand side. There's a presentation from 2023 by Rosamond Humphreys from Camcycle, which will tell you more about that. I should underline again at this point that we're non-partisan, so no matter which candidates were successful, we wanted them to understand how important sustainable transport is to Cambridgeshire residents and to encourage them to include ambitious policies in their plans for the future. So moving on to what we did, we started by trying to develop a theme for our campaign. And at this point, I'll add that the graphic design and comms work was led by Anna Williams at Camcycle. We decided on a theme that positioned we wanted to position sustainable transport as something that improved quality of life for everyone. So we went for a really bold slogan. We went for vote for life-changing transport. We thought we'd go right in there with something bold, and we decided we'd focus on 3 aspects of how transport changed lives in particular that we felt were really relevant at the present time. So access to opportunities, particularly in the context of affordability, improving health, and giving people back control of their lives. And that last one, I think, returning to the theme of the day, that was slightly how to say beating Cambridge's dreadful congestion without mentioning the word congestion directly. Then we needed an identity for our campaign. So we wanted something that was positive, and we wanted graphics that were shareable. Anna designed a really eye-catching campaign logo, which is in the centre of your screen, that pink circle. And we decided we'd use really positive and uplifting images of people walking, cycling, and using buses. We built a page on our website that highlighted the links between transport and quality of life. So if you look at the link here, Cambs Travel Alliance /vote, you can find our elections page. We built that page originally to explain the links between transport and quality of life. And we did that relying on quotes from respected organisations, quotes from individuals, and quotes from local people who appreciated the transport networks here. So, for example, here, there's one on the screen from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation about buses and affordability. Then about 6 weeks before the election, we started running a social media campaign linking the elections to buses, walking and cycling. And the post had shareable graphics and text. This very happy looking lady on the left-hand side, that was one of our shareable graphics. And the text for that post said, expanding opportunities to cycle for people across Cambridgeshire will bring increased independence, freedom and joy. Ask your candidate how they will improve cycle routes and vote for cycling on the 1st of May. And we shared those posts not only on our social media channels, but also in community Facebook groups. And that was really powerful. And we have a reminder for next time to do more of that. And we had leaflets along a similar line and used those to start conversations with people in person. And the second half of our campaign was centred around a manifesto. So we drew up a manifesto for life-changing transport and invited all the candidates for both mayor and county council to sign up to it. So we asked the mayor and the county councillors for affordable buses for all, better walking, wheeling and cycling, well-maintained roads and paths, clean air and safe streets around schools, and transport fit for a changing region. And then under each of those 5 main points, we had lists of 1 or 2 detailed things we wanted the mayor or councillors to do, being mindful of the fact that they both have different responsibilities and powers. So, for example, under walking, wheeling and cycling, we asked the mayor to appoint a walking and cycling commissioner. And we asked, for example, the county councillors to work with communities to deliver more locally led cycling and walking improvements under the LHI scheme. I think the main point here is that we're not asking the councillors to sign up to anything controversial. I think we would have loved to have we ask our next county councillors for a workplace parking levy or something like that. But around election time, I think we put the bar quite low and try and make sure that everyone from every party could at least agree with something in the manifesto. And so here's the outcome. We do indeed have a Conservative mayor, so that prediction was correct. 28% of the vote, with Reform in second place, 23%. And on the county council, the Liberal Democrats, and you can see them there, they gained more seats than expected. And they have now a majority of 1, so they're in control. And that was quite an exciting afternoon on the radio listening to the results come in. It was a slightly unexpected result. The opposition, interestingly, is Reform and the Conservatives tied, and the Greens had a really good night and have 3 seats for the first time on the county council. So moving on to impacts, I'm just going to put a few tantalising things here because I'm hoping we can get into them in the discussion. But the manifesto campaign had really positive outcomes. We had high levels of participation. The mayor did start to talk about buses and say positive things. And there are indications we've raised our profile. If you'll just allow me just to go back a few slides, I've just realised I forgot to say as well in what we did, that we went to hustings. So here on this screen is a slightly silly photo of me holding up our big campaign sign. We made sure we went to hustings and asked questions that were connected with our manifesto for life-changing transport. And that, we found a really effective thing to do. So there we are, I've reached the end. So thank you for listening. And here's a link to our elections page. On our website, you can find links to our social media channels, which have all the social media that we put out. And thanks once again to our principal funder.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. And I wonder, Anna, I know you're here from Camcycle. Did you want to come in? That was wonderful. A really lovely work around that campaign. So do you want to tell us about your approach to this and what worked and what your strategy was?
I think really one of the things in terms of the sort of branding side of it, we were really looking for things that would be shareable content. So it was really nice to see some people, like, we had a member of one of the alliance groups. He was using it on his WhatsApp, like as his little thing. We had many of the parliamentary different party candidates, sort of like the Green Party. I think they shared some of our social media posts and sort of had annotated on top of it. And the picture that Sarah's just got up here of the Labour candidates, Alex and Luke, they were saying they really liked it as well because it had the date of the election. So that's a really key thing to remind voters, what's happening when. So yeah, I think that worked quite well, the sort of boldness of it. And just to sort of talk about the other side. So from within our group, we were working with bus campaigners and walking campaigners as well. The walking campaigners were sort of saying, well, life-changing transport could mean that you trip over a pavement and you break your leg. So it was kind of good to get that challenge. But I think we were effective of getting the story of buses, and particularly in how effective they are at transforming people's lives and helping them increase their access to opportunities and education, and also at a slightly lesser extent the walking and cycling and wheeling as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Anna. Well, I think it's lovely work. I think it's really good, and it's my day job doing this sort of stuff. So a big campaigning thumbs up from me for certain. Just a couple of questions before I bring in some questions from the Q&A. I guess it's kind of nerdy, kind of lobbying question, Sarah. But what level of detail did you track candidates in terms of maybe their voting record or issues that they touched on social? Did you do any sort of mapping of where you thought candidates sat on key issues?
Not for the county council, but for the mayoral, yes, we did. So we had a very early heads up who was going to be the Conservative candidate, and he'd set his campaign priorities very early. So it was very easy to see where he was going. Labour, we're very familiar with because they held the mayoralty beforehand. So I think it was pretty clear, whilst they didn't announce a candidate for absolutely ages, it was pretty clear what their priorities were going to be. And the Lib Dems, they had been in charge of the county, whilst not having a majority, they'd run the county council. So I think my picture of them with the car probably does them a little bit, or did themselves a little bit of a disservice, because actually they're pretty strong on walking, wheeling and cycling. So I think we pretty much knew what they were going to do. Reform were a big unknown, but we didn't ever feel there'd be a threat they'd actually take the mayoralty. So into all the county councils. So whilst we included them in our campaign, we didn't do much research into their policies. And the Greens are sort of building momentum in Cambridge, and we know from our existing relationships with them more or less what their policies are on transport. I think the big surprise during the campaign would be the amount of support for light rail. So the Green Party moved to a position of supporting light rail. I think that was probably one of the big changes. I think perhaps the Conservative candidate can congratulate himself for moving the Green Party candidate to that position. And the Liberal Democrats, yes, spoke maybe more about light rail than they have done in the past.
Interesting. Well, I'm pulling a question out of the chat. So just a reminder for everybody, if you want to ask both Anna and Sarah any questions, if you use the Q&A function, and then people are upvoting so we know which question's most popular and stuff. And I'll come to those in just a second. But Candy asked a question in the chat about whether you concentrated on any geographical areas and whether you'd thought we've really got to focus our strategy on any particular areas. And I know I also wondered you mentioned getting the vote out as being a key part of it because the turnout's so low, and I wonder whether you concentrated that geographically or demographically in any particular way. So was there any hot spots that you aimed for in particular?
I think we took the decision that we couldn't focus on any particular hotspots given that we are non-partisan. So, however, the focus of our base is Cambridge, and I would say that was a natural partner for the outcomes maybe we wanted to see.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Well, let's go to the questions in the Q&A. You've got a very enthusiastic leading the upvoted questions, saying, love it, this is super inspiring. Did you find you needed to deal with any misinformation or disinformation on your social media posts? So how did you deal with the wacky world of disinformation?
Actually, really interestingly, we got very little engagement from the sort of anti-sustainable travel campaigning groups on our social media campaign. So I did wonder whether an edict had come down on high for them just not to engage, so they didn't circulate our posts. I did get called a bus crazed cycle loon in one post. I do remember that. But actually, the misinformation was more, perhaps, I say it delicately, coming from the candidates. We didn't tackle that head on ourselves. We decided instead. So we were really, I think it was really tempting to tackle it head on. However, we took the opposite tack of trying to achieve the outcomes that we had set up. So working to get the mayor to say positive things about buses in particular.
Brilliant. As Matthew said in the chat, Sarah, that bus craze cycle loon is clearly a badge of honor amongst this crowd, without a shadow of doubt. Yeah. And as Tim said, don't feed the trolls. I do think that's really interesting. I mean, I've seen a lot of analysis of particularly campaigning in my case on climate and reform. And actually, if you do get dragged into that kind of head-on battle with reform, you're just simply doing the classic don't think of an elephant framing mistake of reinforcing their argument simply by repeating it inadvertently as you deboot it. So it sounds like you had a really good strategy on that. Right, sorry, I'm monopolising, and that's not fair. Elizabeth has asked a question. The Cambridgeshire mayoral precept interesting to voters as you talk to people? It appeared to support sustainable transport. Did people feel improvements from that?
Oh, that's an interesting one. There definitely, objectively speaking, there definitely have been improvements from the precept. So we have, I think it's now 10 new Tiger branded bus routes. However, the Conservatives have taken a platform that they will not be, well, that is carefully worded. They will not increase the precept. That doesn't mean they're going to let it go completely. There has been polarized political campaigning around it. We ran a campaign 2 years ago to support the increase in the mayoral precept, so encouraging our members and our members to respond positively to the consultation, stating that it was a small amount to pay and brought quite large improvements to bus services. I guess our official group position, however, though, is that we don't really mind how buses are funded. They just need more funding. That's the line we're running with at the minute.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. There is a quirk in all of this that's very frustrating for Robin in particular, who's helping facilitate. So, for those of us who are organisers of the meeting, we can't get into the Q&A and ask questions. So, Robin, did you want to ask your question of Sarah?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask, for the materials you produced, which were very good, did you produce the content for those in-house, or did you pay for some external design, printing, that kind of thing? Obviously, you had some funding for that.
No, for this campaign, the design was led by Anna Williams. So the graphic design, and Anna and I collaborated together on the text for social media posts. Yeah, Anna, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, so that's my background is in design and communication, so that's a handy skill we have in our team. But we also did a lot of work actually across team within Camcycle and within the Alliance. So sort of crowdfunding ideas of different narratives, different slogans and things. So that was really good as well. Kind of just getting the different perspectives from different people and kind of testing, I guess, within ourselves which things we thought would work. And we put quite a lot of different messages out over the whole time, so we could sort of, kind of measure which ones were getting more traction than others.
Yeah, that's really true. I should say with this campaign, we decided we would take a few risks and try things out. So learning and seeing what worked was one of our objectives of this campaign. So doing something slightly different to what we'd done before. Unfortunately, I think as with anything, if we'd started 3 or 4 weeks earlier, we would have had more time to try out more different things, but such is life. We had so many more ideas. We would have loved to have run some video content. We would really have loved, I think, to get out more in person. We did get out to bus stops and cycle parks and talk to people, and that was really interesting and really worthwhile, but we didn't manage to capture as many of their sustainable transport stories, I think, as we'd like to have done. Trying to think, there were a few other things. Yeah, talking of what we could have done more of. We never got onto Nextdoor. I think that would have been really helpful. We never just had time. Community Facebook groups were really useful, but we should have braved Nextdoor because that seems to reach vast numbers of people. And we should also have used our Alliance members more. We should have got local content tailored to their areas that they could encourage their networks to share. And that was one of our original ambitions, but we just ran out of time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. That answered very well, I think there, Robin. You all sorted.
That was a really good answer. Yeah.
Good.
More money, Anna, more people.
I'll stop showering you the praise, Anna, but the work reminds me a little bit. There's a great design outfit in New York that did all of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign materials. I don't know whether you were deliberately inspired by them, but it reminds me a lot of that.
No, I think I mean, as ever, when you're a small team, constraints and time constraints, sometimes bring out good creativity. So I think, having to do things in a rush and trying to think about, the boldness and getting things over, and obviously choosing pink to stay away from any political party colours. That's where some of the design came from.
Brilliant work. Okay, next question. We've got Eileen Murray in Islington. Did your deliberate policy of not being too political, don't scare the horses, get behind something for everyone, pay off? Would you have done anything differently on that front in terms of the political asks?
Oh, I can say, well, in terms of the manifesto, I was really pleased that we had engagement from all 5 political parties. We had candidates, not only engagement, but at least one candidate from each political party pledge support for the manifesto. So I think in that terms, I think we probably did pitch it about right. Anna, anything else to say there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think part of our objective was also, I mean, not just around the election, but, we obviously want to build relationships with these these candidates now councillors and mayor going forward. So this was one thing we were challenged by trustees of Camcycle. You know, had we burned any bridges during the campaign, and so, you know, we really feel we hadn't. We had actually grown relationships, and in fact, because this broader campaign then did also feed into, you know, Camcycle did our normal election surveys. This was actually the first time that a Conservative candidate had engaged with our mayoral election survey, and this is the third mayoral election campaign we've had in our region, and the first time the Conservative candidate had engaged. I really think that is partly due to this whole big campaign and the way it was pitched. So that was a big success for us.
Yeah, maybe I should say something a bit more there. So it was really important to us that the mayor signed up, the Conservative mayoral candidate, who's now the mayor, did sign our manifesto, because pledge number 1 was to proceed with bus franchising. And he's in the slightly uncomfortable political position of needing to take over the former Labour mayor's work and own it for himself. And I think by that point he said he would press ahead with franchising, but maybe not particularly publicly. And at that point, when he signed up to our manifesto, that was public. And that I felt was really important. He also pledged, actually, I'm going slightly off topic here, but the other big pledge he made around buses was to continue the low fare card for under 25s in Cambridge, which again had been a Labour policy. And the current Conservative mayor needs to kind of own that and implement it in his own fashion. And that came about. I think he was tending in that direction because the Labour candidate was making pledges. But we worked with our local citizens chapter. They have a bus action group, and we worked with Cambridge and Peterborough citizens who held a mayoral assembly and got him to pledge in public to that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. I think you may have answered this. I mean, Joe in the Q&A has asked whether you had any interactions with Reform. You have touched on Reform. I mean, did you want to say anything else in terms of interacting with them?
We offered all candidates the opportunity to pledge support for our manifesto, so that included Reform. I had really good engagement from their mayoral candidate, who replied almost immediately to pledge support and to enter into a bit of discussion about policies, and also the county council candidates. Some of them may have been paper candidates, as they are for other parties, but I certainly had positive support from, I think, 3 or 4, and including some who wanted to be featured with their photo cycling on our social media feed. So we made sure we wanted to feature candidates who pledged support on our social media feed, but we were quite careful to do this in equal numbers for each party. So there is on our social media feed, there's a feature on the Reform mayoral candidate, and there's a feature on one of their county council candidates wearing a cycle helmet, talking a bit about the importance of cycling. So I didn't get any pushback at all from the candidates. I had respectful engagement, I would say.
Brilliant. That's great, Sarah. Thank you. Quick question from Tim in the Q&A. We're about to have by May 26th, 2026, a combined authority mayoral election for Suffolk and Norfolk, so not a million miles away from you. As well as up to 6 unitaries by May 28. How do we draw up a manifesto for such a huge and diverse geographical area? What's your tips there for Norfolk and Suffolk?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Well, make sure you cover urban and rural, I would say. We sometimes receive criticism because we are based in Cambridge and we do not remember rural areas enough. And I think we've got work to do to build some stronger links with local campaigning groups in rural areas and better put forward the arguments for better rural walking and cycling. Anna, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I was just thinking as well. I mean, I think collecting some representative stories from across that area. So one thing that Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance has done really well in the past. You did a bus survey in Huntingdon, in Cambridge and Ely, was it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then being able to then go to the mayor and the combined authority with stories from all of those different types of region really kind of strengthened that message. So, you know, I think it would be exactly the same for all aspects of active and sustainable travel. Just you're making sure, you know, you have different stories from across the region you're campaigning.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hannah. So one question we've got, an interesting one from Mark Drain. What would you like to see, or what would help in future making the case around quality of life and health in terms of evidence base? And what did you draw on? Because there's quite a lot of case making there, particularly in the manifesto. And did you feel that had cut through with people as an approach, using evidence from Joseph Rowntree Foundation, etc.? Is there enough local evidence for
I
you to
think
work with?
I think it definitely cuts through with the candidates. I'm not sure it's quite cut through with the general public yet. I mentioned our involvement in the Cambridge and Peterborough Assistance Bus Action Group. The third, they had 4 things that they got the candidates pledged to, and the fourth was a study on the contribution of buses to young people's lives in Cambridgeshire. And I'd definitely like to see some more evidence in that area for our region. Anna has done some work with Fenland Parent Power, and that brought to light the fact that children, young people with less good public transport and active travel connections are less likely to go to university. And I think there should be a lot more study into that, both in terms of our region and nationwide. Anna, any thoughts?
Yeah, just also on that, I think particularly we've seen from officers within the combined authority, you know, sensing that there was going to be a change of kind of political background of the mayor, that actually, you know, focusing on the evidence in terms of health, in terms of access to opportunities, things like safety, you know, that is the sort of common ground where, you know, a new mayor can kind of shift and make it his own. But it's if we're coming from a kind of agreed evidence base, you know, maybe makes it a little bit easier to pick the things that he wants to continue, but you know, keep that continuity from an officer point of view as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hannah. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bundle up a couple of questions in the Q&A that kind of build on that, and the kind of, if you like, sustaining the momentum of what you've done once people are in office, because I think it's really interesting. So Toby's asked, he said it's a great campaign, but were there indications you had an impact on the winning mayoral candidate after their early transport commitments? E.g. on mayors and buses? And Tim Morton from Leicester's has asked about whether bus franchising is improved after day one. I guess those questions are getting at the point of like, is the momentum you've achieved being sustained, do you think, politically?
In terms of buses, so I should say the previous mayor made the decision to go for bus franchising. The next mayor has to implement it. So in terms of our bus services, nothing has changed at this point. The Conservative mayor has the hard job of implementing it. But on day 5, so he's very good, our new mayor, at his social media, very good at putting across the positives and telling people what he's up to. Day 5 of his new mayor, he said day five of being the new mayor, he met with the bus companies and reaffirmed his commitment to proceed with franchising and make it work. So I think there's some momentum there carrying over. We'll be meeting him in September to continue the conversation. Would have been nice if it's earlier, but that's the best we can do. And we'll be attending transport and, it's actually been renamed. We'll be attending his transport committee meetings, raising public questions to remind him of his pledges and keep up momentum. He has, so in the intervening time between becoming mayor and now, the local major commercial bus operator has cut more services. The mayor has leapt in to save one of them, but not the others. So I think we've got mixed messages there from him. And he has already begun working out how to fund his reduced fare pass for the under 25s, which was another of the pledges. So that is well underway.
Thanks,
I
Sarah.
think that
Brilliant.
answers one of the questions, but maybe
Yeah.
not all of them.
Just in terms of if I talk then a little bit more about the county council side. So one of our pledges there was for a school streets officer, safer routes to school. And it's very early days, but I know from some of the conversations I've had that schools are definitely a big focus from this current administration, and we'll be continuing to sort of press on the parts of the manifesto around that, and yeah, continuing to hold them to, especially those ones that pledged to support the manifesto.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna. We've got a question from Shan from Bolton. How would you adapt what you did for an area that has lower existing levels of sustainable travel? I guess probably dealing with Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, you've got some sort of existing sustainable travel happening there. Would you do things differently if you're somewhere that was less well served?
I think you'd maybe include even more low-hanging fruit in the manifesto, I would think. But I think the basic themes would be more or less the same. So affordable, reliable buses, joined up walking and cycling routes, school streets, clean air. Maintained roads. I think you could use the same scaffolding.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. So we touched briefly on Camcycle's work with Fenland Parent Power, and Fenland being much lower levels of walking, cycling, and terrible buses, really. And in some ways, the stories from that area of Cambridgeshire are kind of even more, emotional, and kind of like the need for action is even stronger there. So I think, in some ways, the places where active and sustainable transport is not as established, those stories for the need of it are even more compelling.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna. Now, as people see in the Q&A, we've got a few questions from H, which are quite lengthy and a little bit impenetrable. But I wonder, which is we love you very much, H, by the way. I just need to caveat all of that. But I just wonder whether anybody from Cambridge, because I don't think they're specifically about your campaign. So it'd be really unfair, Sarah and Anna, if we fired a question about coaches, interoperability with bikes, and the X5, which I think popped up a minute ago. But for anybody who's been watching the chat who's from Cambridgeshire, or H, if you want to come in, do you have a question from those three that you posted that is specific to this campaign, or does anybody else from the region want to come in?
Steve, I could do that.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm highlighting what I used when I was building cycle routes in 1985 to 1995. And in Scotland, we could put the bike on any rural bus route. Cambridge has a lot of bus routes going out into the rural hinterland. My grandparents used to live in Newmarket, and quite often I'd go to the ADC and cycle from late at night from Cambridge to Newmarket, which was hell because it's rural roads, unlit, fast. And the ability to sort of put your bike on there will actually open up cycling to a lot of people who are put off riding on fast, unlit rural roads at night. And that's the sort of thing that we're beginning to get back in Scotland, and particularly with coaches, because you can chuck the bike in the coach, and you could do that on the X5. And I also got Stagecoach to modify their conditions of carriage to actually include carrying bikes on their coaches and buses. So it wasn't sort of a major hurdle. So that's the sort of thing I'd like to know whether you can look at it in Cambridgeshire, particularly on the faster routes.
We don't have any involvement with coach campaigning, but in terms of buses, we do have a regular dialogue with Stagecoach. That's one of the advantages of the alliance. Currently, the conditions are that you can take a folding bike on a bus, but you have to put it in a bag, which leaves you in a slightly ridiculous situation, sometimes putting it in a massive laundry bag or something like that. They, at the minute, are not really willing to budge on that, I think. However, it has been pointed out to them that I'm not sure that's consistent nationwide. And last time they had an open public forum with sixth form students, one of their strongest asks was the ability to more easily take a bike on a bus, because many sixth form students in Cambridge coming from rural areas have to change bus, and they would rather cycle the last leg once they've reached Cambridge. Anna, have you got anything to say from Camcycle's point of view?
I was just going to say exactly the same view about the folding buses. I mean, just within our team itself, we often have to travel on a bus and then cycle to a meeting the other end, and it is a big pain to have to carry the bag. I know we have had some buses in Cambridgeshire sort of going to National Trust properties and, sort of trialing carrying sort of buses for leisure rides, but that they're no longer running at the moment. But I think it's a thing that the Combined Authority, they haven't ruled out, but yeah, at the moment it's not top of their list.
Brilliant.
I think that the big selling point is that the cycling to a bus stop expands the catchment for a bus route by a factor of 15, which means you can have a fast bus route that doesn't go through every last village. And the way perhaps to take it steadily is to do a small pilot with a few sixth formers to get in. And I know in Hightrans, I've worked very closely with Hightrans, they actually put bike parking at rural bus stops, or people leave their bikes at their friend's house and catch the big bus. So there's a lot of ways around it, but I think it's a way of expanding the coverage of rural bus routes. And Stagecoach have formed with the Route 10, which was Skegness to Lincoln, where they put the bus along the A57 and then brought people into the hubs and the nodes on the A57 by bike, by taxi, by DRT, so that the bus actually ran faster and used fewer buses to give a better service. And people will do that. So I think there's lots of ways to skin a cat.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thank you. I think that's definitely something we should engage with the Combined Authority on as part of the transition to franchising.
Brilliant. Thanks,
I did
Sarah. Thanks,
recently-
Kate.
Oh, sorry, I
go on,
was just going to say I recently went on some brilliant buses in Mallorca that had flexible space for bicycles. So definitely other countries can do it. We should be able to do it.
Brilliant. Music to many people's ears on this call, Sarah. And H, thanks for telling us about the Newmarket connection. I thought I could pick up a lilt of East Anglia in your voice. So there you go. That explains a lot. We've got one more question. Tim Morton, can I bring you in live? Because your question slightly mistyped in the Q&A, so I couldn't
Oh God,
quite...
not again. Sorry.
I know, exactly. Too many shandies before Active Travel Cafe.
Cheers, everybody.
Do you want to ask your question live and then we'll start to wrap up?
So you've got 18 years of campaigning experience, and in my experience, politicians tend to sort of move around. They're almost like floating voters themselves. And I just wondered if the Reform candidates this time were actually seasoned politicians who you had previous with, and therefore you could work with or would know where they were coming from, or are they all newbies?
Anna, shall I answer that one? No, they were all newbies. However, there has been a bit of movement in the other parties. Conservative to Labour. I can think of one example in St Neots, but not people that we were engaging with particularly closely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Well, listen, I am going to wrap us up. That's all our questions done. You've fielded them brilliantly, and it's been a really, really wonderful presentation and Q&A session. Really enlightening. Loads for other people to take up in their own areas, which is the whole point of Active Travel Cafe. You can spread this, use those, steal all of your excellent tricks. Okay, everybody, I'm going to wrap us up for this evening. It's been another great session. Thank you to our speakers. Thanks, Robin, for ably assisting and letting everybody in. You've seen it in the chat a couple of times, including from Sally. Please do tell us any future suggestions of talks, speakers to invite in. We're always keen to hear from you and who you'd like to see on Active Travel Cafe. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a lovely evening.